Should be live, Just want to check. All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Cider and Pour back for another video. This video is 2 days late. I'm not actually 100% sure what happened on Monday. But Tuesday, yesterday, I had a Christmas present from my mom arrive, and yeah, it was a whole kind of thing. It was something that she wasn't expecting. It was something that was too big to kind of hide. So I had to kind of like set it up and stuff like that, and I had to make sure like that she wasn't going to be back, and so it was a whole thing. So this video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be on toxic femininity. Now, I would be remiss, and I would be I would be doing a disservice if I didn't talk about toxic masculinity first. The toxic masculinity, it kind of gets like, I'm not even necessarily going to say a bad rap, but it kind of, there's a certain connotation when you say that phrase, toxic masculinity. It kind of, it normally comes from your kind of, uh, it kind of comes from your kind of typical kind of more blue-haired feminist type of uh that's what you're more likely to hear it from, right? um and I'm a feminist, by the way. Don't ask me what wave. I believe that if you are a person, then which everybody on the planet is, you are a person, and therefore you are entitled to just as many rights and just as many opportunities and just as many advantages, everything else, as everybody else is. So just shut the fuck up before anybody comes and says that that I'm anti-feminist, or that I'm in some way anti-women or a misogynist or any of these things, right? But toxic masculinity, it's typically said from that kind of group or like something else, right? um And I think that there's a point that people are missing, and I don't think that this is the kind of the you know I don't think that this is the way in which most people kind of use this phrase, because there is such a thing as toxic masculinity. There is a way of being masculine to a toxic uh extent, right? And to um in such a way that it becomes toxic, something that is not even necessarily like objectively good or objectively positive or anything else like that, but something that is kind of neutral, right? There's nothing inherently good or positive or brilliant or amazing about being masculine, right? But something that's just kind of neutral in that sense. um to So like something from that to something that is toxic, right? And to something that is objectively negative. Um, and the way that I mean that is that it is it's more than 80% of people who are the victims of suicide that are men. And it's towards the tail end of my age bracket. So it's 18 to 25, and I'm 25 now. Is who's most likely to be victims of suicide. And more than 80% of suicides are men. And it's because men are told that you have to be tough, and you have to be strong, and you have to be, all of these different things that doesn't even necessarily really mean anything. Um, and like life is full of stresses and of struggles and of all of these different things. It is full of them. And sometimes you just need a helping hand. Sometimes you need to be able just to take a step back and to be able to turn to somebody in your life, whether it doesn't matter who they are, and just be able to say, you know what, I just need some help right now. It might be something small, it might be something very big. The point is that you just need some help. And there is nothing to be ashamed of in that. There is no shame in saying that you need some help. But men typically and traditionally are discouraged from engaging in that behavior. They are discouraged from reaching out, discouraged from asking for help. And that is how masculinity can become toxic. That is one way that is never being mentioned of how masculinity can become toxic, is because you, like, it's all of the big it's shunned in a lot of our society, and a lot of different groups of people. It's shunned. It's kind of said, like, oh, it's not, like, but just stop it, like, just, like, grow a pair or something like this, or you don't need to ask for help, you don't need to do all this. It's just like these sorts of things. It's oh god. um this is the way that masculinity can become toxic, because it it's sort of, oh god, how do I, it becomes this, like, rot, this doubt, this feeling of failure. If you as a guy, feel as though you need to reach out and need to ask for help, but you've been brought up in a society, or you've been brought up in a way that discourages that behavior, you're more likely to feel negative, or to feel bad, or to feel uh not manly, or not strong, or not any of these things, because you have been brought up to believe that men are strong, and to believe that men don't need to reach out. And then, of course, if you feel as though you do, then you feel as though you failed in some weird way, but you haven't. And this is, and it be like that feeling of failure, that feeling of, oh, I've done something bad here, or I've done something wrong. That's not a flower, that's a weed. And you don't need to water it. It'll just stay in your brain, and it'll grow on its own. You don't need to do anything else. You like, you live one day and you come back the next, and it's bigger than it ever was, and you didn't even do anything. And that's the problem that I'm talking about. That's the thing that I'm talking about. Is that, and that weed will eventually take over everything, and you will fall into depression, and then again you won't want to reach out and to do anything, because this idea we have this preconceived notion that all masculinity should be toxic, because men shouldn't reach out. it's this it's this incredibly, like, cyclical, destructive way of that men do this. And you need to reach out sometimes, and you need to ask for help, and because if you don't, that weed is just going to keep growing and growing and growing, until eventually you become a victim of suicide. And so that's just one of the ways that toxic masculinity, like, is a thing, but it's just never talked about, and it's just never mentioned, and it never really kind of is being brought up. And it's one of the things that I felt like I had to talk about. Look, if I was going to be doing a topic on toxic femininity, then I was going to have to talk about toxic masculinity. It's the whole kind of like yin and yang thing, and they're intertwined, and they're both toxic, yes, but they're toxic in different ways and to different extents, and all of these different things. The point is, I felt as though I needed to kind of say that first. But toxic femininity is it's something that I genuinely don't think that people kind of, you know, think about or even kind of like realize is a thing sometimes. Uh because it's just kind of presumed that it's only toxic masculinity. It's not toxic femininity, right? Like that's not a thing. I think it's kind of like the general consensus of most people. But no, toxic femininity is a thing. And like some people say, oh, it's the third wave feminists or like any of these things, but I don't know. Look, I don't even really care about the whole waves thing. I've said how I define that I'm a feminist and what that means to me. I've said what that is, and it's. But if you are a woman and you believe that women are better or that men are inferior to you, you are sexist. Because, and again, I'm not a betting man, but I am willing to bet my house that if a woman was to hear a man say that men are better and that women are inferior to men, instant label of sexist. Instant label. And rightfully so. I'm not going to stand in opposition to that. I'm not going to say that you're wrong. Of course, you're right. If a man says that men are better and that women are inferior, that is sexist. But if you reverse the names and the pronouns, what how is it not sexist if a woman does it? Or if a woman says it? And it's just one of these things that like women never really kind of own up to. Not really. It kind of became this thing that like, oh, it's okay to shit on men. And look at to an extent, it is. It absolutely is okay to shit on men. Men have done some incredibly like fucked up things all throughout history. So yeah, it's okay to shit on men, but it's not okay to shit on all men because some men are bastards. That's not okay to do. In the same way that, if there was a woman who did a crazy, fucked up, like ridiculous thing, it would be bad for me or for any other guy to label all women on behalf of what somebody else did. So I have some examples of toxic femininity that I'm just going to be going through here. So this was a protest outside of a cinema in Spain. I have the advert. Where's my mouse now? Yeah, I have the advert down here of kind of like where it was and stuff like that. So yeah, so this was the screening for a film. It's in Spanish. I don't know what it says. I'm not even going to attempt it, but basically it was of male victims of domestic abuse, right? That's like the big, I don't know if that's like 100% of what it was about, but that's like a major plot point in this movie. And as you can see here, there are a group of women who protested the movie. Now, and I feel like I'm going to be saying this a lot in this video, but I'm willing to bet my house that if these were men, and if these were women, and if that was a woman, that would be the biggest example of sexism in the 21st century that you can, like, even fucking think of. That there would be men protesting a film about women suffering from domestic abuse. That would be the biggest example of sexism and of toxic masculinity that you could even have dreamed of. And it's the exact same thing when it's reversed. I am not saying oh, okay, where am I? Where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? I am not saying that you are accusing me of kind of bashing everybody, like, and so to a degree, I 100% agree. I 100% agree, and I'm not saying this as like a defensive thing. I'm not saying that you're accusing me of this. It's just, I'm not saying that, all women are bad or that all men are brilliant. I'm not saying that. I'm pretty sure I've said the opposite. And again, I'm not going on defense. I'm just trying to, explain a little bit more. I just kind of feel like when you have these like fundamentally toxic and fundamentally like negative aspects about, certain groups of people, I feel like they need to be kind of brought up, and they need to be explained, and they need to be kind of, said. um and I mean, it's just, I mean, like, this film, this poster, this story, like, it bugs me irrationally. Like, it was an irrational bug that I got from it, because it's just so obvious that if this was flipped, it'd be the biggest story about sexism and about misogyny and about, you know, like, this negative aspect of what men are, and like what they do. And I don't know, it just seems so obvious to me that it was just like, how is every woman that is standing there not aware of the fundamental and glaringly obvious irony if any single one of those was to turn around and be outraged about some sexist thing that a man does after this? Because that's kind of one of the biggest things that I don't really think kind of gets said that often, is that when you engage in, or when you are guilty of this level of irony and of, I'm just going to say it, plain fucking stupidity, that you lose the footing that you stand on when you rightly accuse anybody else of sexism or of misogyny or of toxic whatever. You lose that footing. I'm not saying that everybody's perfect. I'm not saying that it's difficult to be consistent sometimes. And I'm not saying that we don't ever fuck up. I fuck up all the time. I've probably done it twice this video so far, and I've only been streaming for less than 20 minutes. So the point is that, like, none of us are perfect, but we should always strive to kind of get rid of the easily dismissible, and that is easily dismissible. So I'm just going to move on to the next one here. This was a story from the New York Post, and I do a mixture of cringe and react in physical pain every time that I see it. UK mom had sex with boy 14 after luring him, a pal, into her home. And the comments, I just picked out one, but it was very much like this. It was pretty much in agreement, or it was this type of comment that was going on. I was never that lucky when I was 14. If you count being raped as being lucky, then you have a very twisted idea of what being lucky is. Because, by the way, she didn't have sex with him, she raped him. That's what happened there. She did not have sex with him. And it's the one thing that is really, really annoying me, because if you want to talk about examples that are glaringly fucking obvious, can you imagine for a moment the outrage, the scandal, the repercussions if that was about a guy, if that was about a dad who lured a 14-year-old girl into his home? Do you really think that they were going to say that he had sex with her or that he raped her? It's just, oh God. It's just one of those things. It's just so unbelievably obvious that they would never in a million years say that if it was a man, but they're going to if it was a woman. There's some other stuff that was said. Um, somebody was replying to somebody else. I'm pretty sure it might have actually been that previous comment that I had showed you or something like that. And she says, perfect example of toxic masculinity. And as you can see, my tweet that I sent back was and replacing rape with sex in the announcement about one, then that's the clearest example of toxic femininity that I've ever seen. And then I say, yeah, it will just never kind of. It'll just never cease to amaze me, like how I don't know. See, like, this is easy for me, right? And it's a problem. It's a problem that I didn't, or that I know that I'm very guilty of, and it's because if I know that I can very easily see something, right, or that I can very easily see somebody else's perspective, I get very annoyed or very angry or very if somebody else doesn't see it the same way, because because if it's so obvious for me, then I kind of feel like it should be obvious for everybody else as well. And I get frustrated when people don't see it. But Dave, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. You're 100% right. It is wrong from both sides. Definitely. Definitely. It's toxic masculinity and femininity. It just I have one more in this and then I'll. Oh yeah, that was just that was kind of what I had said. I had also tweeted that back at the time. Or I'm pretty sure that was my response to the actual NYC tweet. But anyway, there was one other example that I had on this, and classic one. Classic one. It's from the Jeremy Kyle show. Classic show. Used to love the show when I was younger. But this again is kind of It's kind of what I'm talking about. And it's the double standard that gets me. And it's the, if it's the irony and the double standard. But it's because the double standard is so glaringly obvious. Like in the last picture that I had up, would it really say had sex with if it was a guy with an underage girl? Of course not. And in this little extract from a story on the show, again, very, very clear example of a double standard. So the whole thing is, you said this when you came out, she was violent and she was quite controlling. This is Jeremy talking. Then he says that she locked him in the flat and he had to jump out of the 3-story balcony and he ended up in the hospital. And the audience laughed. And I remember seeing that clip and watching that episode, and the audience like loudly laughed. And Jeremy, to be totally honest with you, like you kind of like look for all of his faults and for all of how much of a dickhead Jeremy Kyle is, you do kind of have to, hand it to him. Like he handled this very, very well. Because what he said is, can I tell you why that's not funny though? I'll tell you why I don't think that you should laugh. If a woman sat here and said a bloke locked her in the flat and she had been forced to jump out of a window, you would not be laughing. And every single word, including can and fucking I in that block, was 100% true. It's 100% true. Nobody in that audience would have laughed if he was a girl. Nobody. Because it would have been one of the clearest examples of domestic abuse that we've seen in a very long time. And I just don't get why this is so obvious for some and why it is so confusing and so like weird and or something else for other people. I genuinely don't understand it. I genuinely don't. It's the double standard, and it is because our wider society as a whole has become okay with, and this is something that I would agree with, women holding men accountable for the sexist and the misogynistic things and practices that they have been engaging in for a very long time. That's good. That's a positive thing. That's a positive thing. But somewhere along the line, it became acceptable acceptable for women to display some of the very same behaviors that they were so correct in calling out. And then an unrealistic standard that no man would ever get applied to them when it comes to things like rape and when it comes to things like abuse. It's never applied equally. It's never applied equally. And I don't even know if I would kind of say that it's toxic femininity, but some people kind of lump this in, so I'll just comment on it very, very briefly. People say that the fact that women get custody, what is it, like more than, I think it's like more than high 70s into the low 80s percentage of the time that they get sole custody of the kids, or that they get majority custody, or even if it is split, but it's kind of almost obviously seen as being favoring the woman, right? Well, sometimes, and I'll admit it doesn't happen very often. Sometimes men can be better parents than women. A little bit more often, men can be just as good of parents as women. But to suggest that women are better parents 80% of the time, that's just flat out fucking wrong. And to suggest that men are not able to, be the sole parent or have sole custody or have majority custody of the kids is wrong. That is one of those very, very tricky things, though, because it does vary and it does depend so heavily on individual circumstances. I'm not suggesting that it should be taken, from 80% down to 60. All I'm saying is that courts and judges need to do better and evaluate these things on a case by case basis. Now, I know that that's going to be difficult, and I know that that's going to take some time, and I know that that's going to, almost try, have to involve a judge partaking in armchair psychology, right? And trying to determine which is the better parent. And I'm not saying that they're going to get it right 100% of the time, and nobody would expect anybody to get it right 100% of the time. But just a little bit more equal and a little bit more balance. That's all we're asking for. Well, that's all I'm asking for. Because I think that it's what kind of frustrates me about this topic and why it's kind of taking me a little bit longer than is normal to kind of gather my thoughts on it is because like people are kind of automatically in agreement. Oh, that yeah, the toxic masculinity is a thing, and it just kind of becomes like a thing that you would. It's very, very easy to talk about. And it's very easy to kind of get people on your side. The toxic masculinity is a thing, but people never really kind of talk about toxic femininity, and so you're talking about it, but you're also trying to convince your audience or to convince the people that you are talking to that toxic femininity is even a thing before you even attempt to go on to about how bad it is, or about how negative it is, or how badly it can affect things or people or whatever the situation is. It's just this topic needs to be kind of talked about, and I it's why I did the video on it in the first place. It's why I decided that it was going to be something that I talk about, and I'm sure that look, a guy talking about the bad or the negative things that women do, it's going to be picked up, and I almost automatically know that I'm going to be called a sexist or a misogynist and whatever, and that's fine. If you think that, that's fine. I'm not saying anybody in the audience for right now or anybody who has commented so far thinks that, but if anybody does, that's fine. I know that I'm not, and I don't care about your opinion. I know that I'm not, and you can call me all of these things from now until the end of time. It's not going to make a blind bit of difference to me. Because I was raised by one of the strongest women that I know. One of the strongest women I know. And my mom was a single parent for a very long time and has been for a very long time. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. You know, we've like not exactly been how would you say it, like wealthy, but we've been okay. We haven't been poor. We haven't been anything else like that. But again, look, even though you know my father makes more money than my mom does and stuff like that, I still wouldn't. If I had the choice, if I had the option, I wouldn't have been raised by my dad. I'd have still been raised by my mom. And look, it's just so like say that I don't respect women, say that I hate women, all you like because I don't. You know, I was raised. I'm going to say it again. I was raised by one of the strongest women that I know, and I mean, if I couldn't stand up to her and tell her that she was, you know, wrong, then I'm not going to say it about anybody else either. That doesn't make me a bitch. It just makes her a hell of a fucking strong woman. That's all. This has been a little bit of a tough one because I don't have scripts for my videos. I don't, I don't like read something out. I have bullet points about like roughly what I'm going to talk about and stuff like that, and then it's just kind of just like from the brain or whatever. But this is one of those ones where that like even though I had like the bullet points and stuff like that, like it's still pretty kind of tough to talk about because just because that like you can foresee the kind of reaction if a new subscriber or if a new viewer sees this as their first video from me, they might get the wrong impression about what my channel is about or about what the type of person I am. So if they've made it this far, I mean, I said that I was a feminist at the top of the video, so but I'll say it again. I'm a feminist. I believe that um, men, women, everybody from LGBTQIA, everybody. If you are a person, then you are entitled to just as much rights as everybody else. As long as they are not infringing or harming anybody else, you have as much rights and as much freedom to do whatever you want to do. That is my personal opinion. My politics are that I'm a socialist. So even though you might not agree with me, I'm going to fight for you to get healthcare. Even though you might think that it's evil communism or that it's the worst thing that could happen, I'm going to fight to make sure that you pay less for your health insurance. There is something that Bernie said when he was running last time. He said that I am willing to fight for somebody that I don't know, and I'm willing to do the same. I'm willing to argue on behalf of policies that don't even necessarily benefit me, but that I know would benefit somebody else. I'm willing to fight for that. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I've never said a racist thing in my life. I'm not saying that I've never said a misogynistic or a sexist thing in my life because I have. I know that I have. I'm not perfect and nobody is. But I think that we should all strive to do better and to be a more positive influence and to try and make the world, a better place is kind of too often said. So I'm going to say to try and make the world a more pleasant place to live. So, as I have done in the last couple of videos that I've done, I'm going to start to make this a little bit of a trend now. If anybody in the live chat, if anybody in the chat, or if anybody who is watching this now has a disagreement with me, say so. I'll post the link to this room down in the comments. Come in and we'll talk about it. Um, I'm going to leave that offer open for a minute or so, and if nobody bites, then I'll assume that as per usual that I'm right, because I'm very rarely wrong. And I'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow, but we'll leave it open for another little while. Tomorrow's video is going to be on the conservatives meltdown towards Harry Styles for wearing a dress on the cover of Vogue. I think it was Vogue. I think it was Vogue. Um, so yeah, so that'll be a fun one. So yeah, so looking forward to that one. That's going to be a little bit more fun rather than this one, because this one was a little bit more serious, you know. And even though I was reacting to stuff, like, I kind of, you kind of needed to kind of treat it with that level of seriousness. So yeah, doesn't seem like anybody is biting. So on that note, then I'm just going to go ahead and end the stream, and we'll see you tomorrow, same start time, 3:15. I don't know what time that is in the US, but if you have the bell on, then you'll know when I go live. So yeah, until tomorrow, Cider and Port out.